My name is Cleo Mathers, and I make things that could hurt you if you hugged them wrong. Bronze and welded steel, resin that looks like smoke trapped in glass, pieces that weigh as much as small cars, and tiny ones that fit in your palm like a secret. Denver's air always smells a little like snow and dusted pine, even in summer. In winter, it gets sharper, like a clean blade. That winter, the one this whole story started, I was 35 and living above my studio in a converted warehouse in Reno, a neighborhood that thinks it's a museum with beer. I'd welded until midnight and fell asleep with my boots on the cot. When the heat clicked off, I woke up shivering and went downstairs with a blanket over my shoulders, touching the cold spines of my sculptures, like I was checking the pulse of sleeping animals. The new series fault lines leaned against the wall, steel plates ruptured by glass seams, each one a quiet explosion. I was proud, and pride is a dangerous drug. Madison Vale at Eastline Gallery had been thrilled, in 6 exclamation points. This work is your next level, Cleo. She had a manicure that could slice citrus and a way of kissing both your cheeks without touching you. We'd agreed on prices a month earlier, after a lot of espresso and a little theater, mid-5 figures for the big ones, high 4 for the smaller works. We'd talked about protecting the market, slow release, waiting lists. We're not chasing quick cash, she'd said, draped in a winter white coat. We're building your value. My hands were still black with soot. I signed. The opening night smelled like expensive cologne and wet wool. Snow flurried against the gallery's glass like static, and inside the lights were bright enough to bleach my fingerprints. People gathered and pretended to ignore each other while absolutely not ignoring each other. I stood by the far wall with a plastic flute of something called Prosecco that tasted like shiny pennies. A couple in coordinated gray approached. Fault line no, 3. The one with the jagged glass spine. He lifted his phone, took a photo, and then leaned in to read the wall tag. He snorted. She tilted her head. Huh. I thought she was, more expensive. My neck prickled. I set my drink down and moved closer, like a stranger stepping into my own living room. The numbers on the tag didn't make sense, not just low, ridiculous, an impossible comma. I blinked, math racing behind my eyes. The small fault line that should have read $18,500 showed $1,850. A zero gone missing. A decimal sneaking into places it didn't belong. Must be a typo, I said, more to myself than them. The woman shrugged, already drifting toward a painting that looked like a very sad watermelon. At the next piece, the tag was also wrong. Different wrong. A piece that Madison and I had agreed would be $42,000 was listed for $4,200. Clean fonts, professional print, not a typo. My stomach sank in steps, like an elevator catching up to gravity. I looked around for Madison. She was near the desk, laughing with a critic whose reviews read like haikus written during a migraine. Madison's hair was in a perfect knot. A red sticker bloomed on the tag behind her sold. I threaded through bodies. Hey, I said, and I was surprised by how calm my voice sounded. The prices. Madison blinked at me with performance innocence. Aren't they lovely? We're getting amazing traction. The tags are wrong. She tilted her head. Oh? Let me see. We walked to fault line no 1. Another red sticker. Another insult price. Must be the printer, she said. Or the new intern. You know how interns are. Tiny hands, big mistakes. Madison, I said. All of them? She glanced around, lips pursed, as if the room were a temperamental friend. It's actually a strategy, she said softly. A temporary recalibration to broaden your collector base. Volume, Cleo. We can sell out the entire series tonight. I felt the heat rise behind my eyes. We agreed on protection. Yes, and we're protecting you from stagnation, she said, like she was describing sunscreen. You've been a little niche. Niche? Industrial. Dark. Men love you. We need women who live in houses with white kitchens, she said. Think of it as seeding the market. Seeding? My voice cracked on the word. She leaned closer. When you're in the MoMA one day, and I believe you will be, you'll thank me for creating a wide base. She turned away before I answered, her attention caught by a man whose scarf cost more than my welder's. She lifted her hand, and the red sticker followed, dotting another tag with the stain of closure. I stood there, my heart knocking against its own ribs, and it felt like being cheated on while sitting next to the person doing the cheating. A woman in a camel coat approached me like she was approaching a stray dog. "You're Cleo, right?" she asked. I nodded. "I love this one," she said, gesturing to No. 3. "Such a deal. We almost bought one of your earlier pieces last year, but it was way out of reach." "Uh-huh," she smiled. "We didn't realize your prices had adjusted." The word landed like a coin in an empty jar. Adjusted. I took a breath that felt like swallowing ice. "Enjoy it," I said, and wanted to bite the syllables out of the air. Behind me, Madison laughed again, lighter than air. I slipped into the back hallway, past the bathroom, and the room where they stored extra chairs and bubble wrap. The gallery office door was half closed. Warm light spilled under it, amber against the concrete floor. I knocked and pushed. Empty. A laptop slept on a glass desk, the screen glowing with that aquarium blue wallpaper. A shelf of catalogs lined the wall, spines straight like teeth. I shouldn't have. I did. The laptop was open to Madison's email. A thread named E.M. Pricing had a star next to it. I double-clicked. The chain unfurled like a bad magic trick. Madison to Carter Market Strategy, and CC'd to a critic whose handle I recognized from a few brutal write-ups. Subject line: Plan for Q1. Dropping valuations on her new series will reset expectations, Carter had written. Make her accessible. Then we pick up inventory for clients before the inevitable bump. Her reputation survives. She can be our steal story. Madison replied, Agree. Underprice at launch, limit to local coverage. Then raise slowly with select discoveries. My hands went cold and hot at the same time. Another email. We want her to be the gateway for our larger clients, Madison wrote. They'll feel smart. It pulls traffic for the other show. A follow-up from the critic. Happy to do a rough diamond piece, hinting at undervaluation. Send me talking points. Talking points. My chest tightened. I scrolled. There was a spreadsheet attached with columns labeled Ask, Public, Discount, Holdback. Next to each of my titles were numbers that lined up like a smirk. They'd hollowed out my work and left the shell. I heard my name in the hallway. Footsteps. I snapped a few photos with my phone. My fingers shook so hard the shutter sounded like a cough. Cleo? Madison's voice, bright. Getting closer. I closed the laptop and looked for a place to hide, like a teenager in a house that wasn't hers. The only options were a too-shallow closet, under the glass desk like a cockroach, or behind a rolling white partition stacked with canvases. I slid behind the partition and held my breath. Paint dust tickled my nose. The door opened. Madison stepped in, still talking to someone in the hallway. Just a minute, Eric. I'll grab the list. Her heels clicked toward the desk. I tried to will myself into a sculpture. Cold, metal. No blood. No sound. Just an object. The partition's wheel vibrated under my hand with each step she took. She opened the laptop. I could hear her nails on the trackpad, the small sigh she always made before a lie. I thought of my father, who told me when I was 11 that strength wasn't the ability to carry weight, it was the ability to set it down. He died the year before I moved to Denver, and grief had its own texture like unfinished steel. I thought of the first time I held a welding torch, the white light chewing the air, the way metal surrendered and hardened again in a shape I chose. I thought of the wall tags out there, with the wrong numbers, the little red stickers blooming like a rash. Where's the... Madison paused. Huh. She was staring at the screen. Maybe she'd seen the email thread open and thought of the wrong person finding it. Maybe she smelled my anger through the cracks in the door. She turned, a small shift in the air, and for a second I swore she could see me through the canvas. Madison? Eric called from the hall. The couple from Cherry Creek wants to talk price on the big one. Of course they do. she said, sweetness snapping like a trap. Tell them I'll be right there. The door started to close, then stopped, then clicked shut. Silence. I let out a breath so slow I felt my ribs creak. My phone vibrated in my pocket, a text from a number I didn't have saved. I slid the phone up just enough to see the screen. Unknown. They're doing it to you again tomorrow. Check the back room. Bottom shelf. My heart kicked. Behind me, a metal storage cabinet crouched like a safe. Bottom shelf. I eased the door open, every hinge a scream I was sure she would hear. Inside were stacks of catalogs, a box labeled Returns, and a shallow drawer unit I'd seen in architects' studios. I pulled the bottom drawer. In it, a thin folder with my name on it. CM Hold. I opened it. Consignment forms, alternate invoices, a pile of purchase agreements with handwritten numbers that didn't match any of the tags. In the corner, a sticky note with a list of names and 3 columns: offer, public, final. My work treated like a clearance rack at a department store that smelled like leather and denial. I took photos. Every page, every sticky note. As I turned the last sheet, something fell out and skittered under the cabinet. A USB drive. Black. Unmarked. I reached down and my fingers brushed cold concrete. The drive was just out of reach. In the hallway, footsteps returned. 2 sets now. Eric's laugh. Madison's perfume. That sharp white flower scent that felt like being told a secret you didn't want. I stretched my hand into the dark gap, and the USB nudged closer to my fingertips. The office door handle turned. I grabbed the drive. The latch clicked. And then, the latch clicked open, and I froze with my hand still on the USB drive. Madison stepped inside first, her heels sharp as gunfire on the concrete. Eric followed, whispering something about buyers waiting and moving fast before they change their minds. I was still crouched behind the partition, heart punching in my throat, praying neither of them could hear it. Madison walked right past me to the desk. The glow from the laptop cast a blue halo across her wrist. She started typing fast. Irritation clicking through her fingers. Eric sighed. You sure we can keep this up? Someone's gonna notice. Madison didn't even look up. Notice what? That Cleo's pieces are selling? That we're helping her finally move units? Still, dropping her prices that far. Please, she cut him off. She's an artist. Artists don't understand the market. We do. She'll thank me when collectors start calling her a rising star again. Eric gave a low whistle. And when those same collectors sell her work for 5 times what they paid? Madison smiled. The kind of smile you only wear when you've already decided you don't have a soul. Then they'll owe me a favor. And that, Eric, is priceless. My hand clenched around the USB until it hurt. Every word was another nail in the coffin of what I thought was a partnership. Eric laughed softly. Remind me not to get on your bad side. Oh, honey, she said, snapping the laptop shut. There's no safe side. They left the office a few seconds later. The door closed behind them, and the sound of voices faded into the hum of the gallery. I exhaled so hard my knees gave out. I slid out from behind the partition, legs trembling, and stared at the space they'd just stood in. The room still smelled like her perfume, white jasmine, and deceit. I pocketed the USB and slipped out the back door into the freezing Denver night. The alley behind Eastline was wet from melting snow, reflecting the red taillights of passing cars. I leaned against the brick wall, chest heaving, and pulled the USB out. Tiny, ordinary, harmless, except it wasn't. I had proof now. But proof of what, exactly? They'd called it a strategy. I called it sabotage. My fingers shook as I scrolled through the photos on my phone. The emails. The price lists. The notes. The names. I had all of it but no idea what to do next. If I went public, they'd bury me before morning. If I stayed quiet, I'd become a story told in whispers at art fairs. Remember Cleo Mathers? She used to be something, before her market collapsed. The choice tasted like rust. I zipped the USB into the inside pocket of my welding jacket and started walking home. Snowflakes caught in my hair, melting into the back of my neck. Denver at night can feel like it's holding its breath, quiet streets, just the distant hum of a train or the sigh of wind against glass. My studio wasn't far. Inside, the air smelled like acetone and metal dust. My pieces sat in half-light, long shadows cast across the concrete floor. They looked like witnesses waiting to testify. I set the USB on the work table and stared at it. "What did you see, huh?" I whispered. My own voice sounded strange, thin, tired. I plugged it into my laptop. The screen flickered, then opened a directory labeled EAST line, hold files. Inside were dozens of folders, each named after an artist I knew. Friends, rivals, people whose shows I'd attended. Each folder had documents, contracts, secret pricing lists, emails, appraisals, even resale instructions. They weren't just undercutting me. They were running a full-blown racket. My stomach dropped. They'd been manipulating entire careers, inflating and deflating markets like they were pumping tires. Then I saw something worse. C. Mathers, Legacy, DocX. I opened it. It wasn't a contract. It was a strategy memo. Objective: phase out current Mathers catalog by mid-Q2. Position her as an undervalued artist to increase future leverage. Introduce new talent under similar aesthetic profile. Successor narrative. Maintain exclusivity of distribution. They were planning to replace me. Copy my style, copy my name's shadow, and leave me a ghost in my own market. I slammed the laptop shut. My chest felt like someone had welded it shut from the inside. The next morning, I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I just worked. Welding sparks burst like fireflies in the gray light of dawn. Each swing of the hammer was an argument. Each joint fused was a heartbeat forced back into rhythm. I didn't know what revenge looked like yet, but I knew what it sounded like: the hiss of torch flame, the scream of grinding steel. By noon, my friend Theo stopped by. He ran a print shop downstairs and always smelled like ink and burnt coffee. "Cleo," he said, leaning in the doorway. "You look like a storm hit you." Maybe it did. He stepped inside, eyeing the half-finished sculpture in front of me, a twisted steel frame around a hollow center. "New series?" "Maybe," I said. "Depends on how mad I stay." He chuckled, then noticed the USB plugged into my laptop. "You working on something digital? That's new." "Not exactly." I hesitated. Theo wasn't part of the art world's upper crust. He didn't care about gallery politics. That made him the safest person I knew. So I told him. Everything. Madison. The fake prices, the emails, the drive. He didn't interrupt, just listened, arms crossed, eyes dark. When I finished, he let out a long whistle. "That's Jesus, Cleo. That's criminal." "Yeah, but proving it won't matter if no one listens." He leaned on the table. "Then make them listen." "How?" Theo looked at my sculptures. "You already speak louder than they do. Maybe it's time to stop letting galleries do the talking." That night, I couldn't stop thinking about what he'd said. My art was my voice, but it had been twisted, muffled, sold cheap like a knockoff. What if I could tell my story, directly, unfiltered, unpriced, unapproved? An idea began to take shape. Wild, reckless, beautiful. A guerrilla exhibit, outside the system, on my own terms. I'd take my pieces to the streets literally. Set them up in public spaces, parking lots, alleys, rooftops. Tell the story behind each piece. What it cost to make. What the gallery sold it for. Who profited. Truth as sculpture. Steel and fire and confession. I could already see it, the headlights reflecting off welded surfaces, the hum of passing cars, strangers stopping to read the real story carved into the base of each piece. But I couldn't just rush in blind. Not yet. I needed allies, money, and above all, exposure, the kind Madison couldn't control. I stared at my laptop, the folder of Eastline's dirty secrets still open. I could use their own rot against them. But then a thought hit me: if they were willing to destroy my reputation, what would they do if I exposed them? My phone buzzed. A text from Theo. "Theo, if you're really doing this, I know someone who can help." Street artist. Goes by Echo. He hates galleries more than you do. I stared at the message. Echo. I'd heard the name whispered around Denver's underground art scene. Ghost murals appearing overnight. Massive sculptures made from junkyard scrap, welded in the dark. I texted back. Me. Tell him I'm interested. Theo replied instantly. Theo. Already did. He says meet him under the 38th Street overpass at midnight. Don't be late. I looked around my studio. I packed the USB, my laptop, and a small piece of fault line No. 5 into the back of my truck. Snow started falling again, thick and quiet. As I drove toward the overpass, the city lights blurred in the windshield, streaks of gold and white like smeared paint. I didn't know what waited for me under that bridge, but I knew one thing for sure. Madison Vale had no idea what kind of storm she'd created, and I was done being sold. When I turned onto 38th, I saw the flicker of a torch under the bridge, blue flame cutting through the dark. A figure in a welding mask looked up, sparks falling like stars. Cleo Mathers, a voice said. I've been waiting for you. The blue torchlight flickered off the underpass pillars like ghost fire. The air smelled like burnt metal and motor oil. He stood there tall, wiry, a black hoodie under a welding apron, mask pushed up so I could just see the edge of a grin. Echo, you're later than I thought, he said. His voice was low, steady, the kind of calm that hides storms. Traffic, I said, even though there hadn't been any. He laughed once, sharp. Traffic doesn't stop, Cleo Mathers. Scandal does. I stiffened. You know who I am. Everyone down here knows who you are, he said, pointing his torch toward the shadows where half-built sculptures loomed. The gallery girl who got gutted by Eastline. The one with fire in her hands. I stepped closer. Then you know why I'm here. He tilted his head, considering me. Theo said you want to burn them down. I want to show the truth, I said, and if it burns, so be it. That made him smile, slow, dangerous. Good, because that's the only way anything changes. He led me through a maze of scrap metal and broken furniture, welded into strange forms, bent rebar angels, a car door turned into wings, a steel heart hanging from chains. It was beautiful and brutal all at once. This is where I work, Echo said. The city builds walls, I build over them. He picked up a jagged steel plate, spun it in his hands. Theo said you've got proof. The gallery racket. I pulled out the USB. Enough to sink them, he nodded. Then we turn it into art. I blinked. Art? He leaned closer. You don't fight the system by suing it. You make it choke on its own image. You want revenge? You make the lie visible. He pulled out a small projector from a crate. I can get your story in front of people before sunrise, projection, art, graffiti, the works, but we'll need your pieces. The real ones. My sculptures? He nodded. The ones they underpriced. The ones they thought they owned. Bring them out here. We'll build something new, something no one can ignore. I hesitated. Moving my work out of the gallery circuit was career suicide. Once you go rogue, you don't get invited back. But then I remembered Madison's laugh. The spreadsheet, the red stickers, they'd already erased me. Okay, I said. Let's do it. Echo's grin widened. Knew you'd say that. He gestured to the shadows. You'll need a crew. I've got 2 guys, Juno and Mara. Both used to install museum exhibits before they got blacklisted for calling out stolen work. He yelled into the dark. Hey, wake up. We've got company. 2 figures emerged from the other side of the underpass, Juno, tall and quiet, dreadlocks tied back, and Mara, compact, fierce, with paint-stained hands. Juno nodded at me. We've seen your work. The Fault Line series. It's raw. Thanks, I said cautiously. Mara smiled. We're gonna make them regret every zero they dropped. Echo clapped his hands. All right, family meeting. Here's the plan. Cleo brings her pieces. We set up the first exhibit where they can't miss it. Downtown, near the art walk route. 1 night only. No permission, no permits. Juno added. We light it. Project her evidence onto the sculptures. Make the city the gallery. And the story? I asked. Mara pulled a spray can from her pocket and shook it. We tag it on every piece. Real quotes from those emails. Their words in paint. The image flashed in my mind, my steel, my glass. My blood turned into a mirror for their corruption. I'm in, I said. Echo looked pleased. Good. You've got 48 hours. Back in my studio, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Purpose. I welded until dawn. The hiss of the torch became my heartbeat again. I pulled out the sculptures Eastline hadn't sold and began modifying them, adding jagged cutouts, hollow cores, and welded text plates that I'd stamp with fragments from the emails. Seeding the market. Rough diamond. Accessible talent. Each word burned into metal like a scar. I didn't sleep. I didn't want to. By the next evening, my studio looked like a war zone, metal shards, sparks, dust. But the pieces looked alive again. Theo stopped by, wide-eyed. Cleo, this is insane. You're turning their language into weapons. Not weapons, I said. Truth. He nodded slowly. Same thing, sometimes. At midnight, the truck was loaded. 5 sculptures, each wrapped in blankets, chains, and my anger. We drove in silence through the frozen streets. Echo's crew followed in a van, headlights off. The downtown lights grew brighter ahead, reflected on the snow. We stopped near the Wincoop Viaduct, under an overpass that faced a busy art corridor, exactly where Eastline's biggest buyers would stroll in 2 days for the next gallery crawl. This is perfect, Echo said. They'll see it whether they want to or not. Juno and Mara began unloading, welding stands into place. I helped, tightening bolts with numb fingers. Echo set up a small generator and the projector. Once this starts, he said quietly, there's no going back. I smiled. There's nothing left to go back to. He nodded and hit a switch. The projector hummed. The first image flickered across the sculpture, an email header. Dropping valuations on her new series will reset expectations. The light spilled over the steel like confession. Then, another. She can be our steel story. Mara began spraying red across the base. The price of truth. Juno filmed everything. Drone shots, close-ups, crowd reactions. People began gathering, drivers slowing down, pedestrians stopping to stare, phones lifting. The projections cycled faster. Contracts, spreadsheets, signatures. Someone gasped. That's Eastline's logo. Another voice. Wait, are those real? The murmurs grew into shouts. Cameras flashed. Then I heard sirens. Echo turned. We've got maybe 5 minutes. I stepped forward, into the beam of the projector, and lifted my chin. Record this, I said. Juno nodded, camera steady. My name is Cleo Mathers, I said, loud enough for my voice to bounce off the pillars. These are my pieces, my work, my story. And this, I gestured to the images, is what they did to me. The sirens grew louder. Blue and red lights flared at the edge of the bridge. People started shouting, some cheering, some panicking. Echo grabbed my arm. Time to go! Not yet, I said. One more thing. I turned toward the camera. Madison Vale, I said, my voice cutting through the chaos. This is your opening night. Then the floodlights hit us. Police shouting, tires screeching. Echo yanked the generator's cord, killing the power. The screen went black. We ran. I could still hear people yelling my name as we disappeared into the alleys. We didn't stop until we reached the warehouse. I collapsed against the wall, lungs burning. Echo dropped beside me, laughing breathlessly. That, he said, was art. Theo's voice came through the walkie. Cleo, you're trending. It's everywhere. The projections, the emails, someone live-streamed it. Hashtag number priced out truth. My pulse pounded in my ears. Echo looked at me, grin fading to something more serious. You realize they'll come after you now, right? Hard. I know, I said, still catching my breath. Let them. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the USB. Because that wasn't everything. Echo's eyes widened. There's more? Enough to destroy the entire Eastline network. He smiled, slow and sharp. Then let's make part 2 even louder. Outside, Snow fell through the streetlight like ash. I looked out at the city, my city, and whispered, now they'll know what I'm worth. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Not even close. Because Madison Vale had just gone silent. And silence from someone like her meant something was already moving in the dark. By sunrise, Denver was awake and burning. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Hundreds of notifications, thousands of messages. The gorilla exhibit had gone viral overnight. Number priced out truth was everywhere. Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, even Reddit. Clips of the projections played on repeat. My sculptures glowing under the bridge. My voice calling out Madison Vale by name. Her emails shining across the steel like confessions. Someone had added slow-motion footage and moody piano music. Another turned it into a meme. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or throw up. Theo burst into my studio mid-morning, phone in hand. "Cleo," he gasped, "you're trending above the Denver Broncos and Taylor Swift combined." I looked up from my workbench, eyes gritty from no sleep. "That's either incredible or horrifying," he grinned. "Both. The local news is already covering it. They're calling it the Artists' Rebellion. Eastline's locked down their socials, everything's gone private." I leaned back in my chair, exhaustion sinking into my bones. Madison must be losing her mind. Theo scrolled through his feed. "You don't know the half of it." He turned his screen toward me. There she was, Madison Vale, standing outside Eastline Gallery, surrounded by reporters, oversized sunglasses, perfect coat, pretending not to sweat. She was saying all the right things. "We're deeply concerned about the misinformation circulating online. Eastline values all our artists and their creative autonomy. We believe this was an unfortunate misunderstanding." I clenched my jaw. "She's spinning it already," Theo nodded. "And she's good. She's calling it a digital manipulation campaign. Says someone hacked her files." I slammed my fist on the table. "She's calling me a liar?" Theo's voice softened. "She's scared. That's how people like her fight, by rewriting the story." I rubbed my temples. "Then I'll just have to write it louder." "Well, but the internet doesn't care about truth. It cares about spectacle." By noon, I had fans, trolls, journalists, and concerned collectors all flooding my inbox. Half of them called me brave. The other half called me crazy. A message popped up from an unknown number. "Unknown. Nice stunt. But you've made dangerous enemies. Be careful who you trust." I stared at it. Uneasy. Deleted it. Then, another came through, this one from Madison's PR team. Eastline legal notice. Cease all defamation and unauthorized use of proprietary documents immediately. Failure to comply will result in litigation for damages and breach of contract. I laughed. I showed Theo. "They're threatening to sue me with my own stolen money." Theo frowned. "You need to get ahead of this, Cleo. The media cycle's short. You've got maybe a day before they start painting you as unstable." "I don't care what they call me," I said, "as long as they keep looking." That night, Echo came by the studio. His boots were wet, his face hidden under the hood of his jacket. "You okay?" he asked. Define okay. He glanced at the laptop on my workbench. "You seen the news?" "Yeah. Madison's crying about being hacked." He chuckled darkly. "Classic. But it won't stick if we hit again." I looked up. "Hit again?" He leaned on the table, close enough that I could smell the smoke on his clothes. "You've got more files, right? Let's use them." "I'm not sure another projection will do it. The police are already looking for us." He smiled. "Who said anything about a projection?" He reached into his bag and pulled out a small black box. "This," he said, setting it on the table, "is a transmitter. We hijack a few digital billboards downtown. Play your story across the skyline." I stared at it. "That's borderline terrorism." "Art is always terrorism to the powerful," he said quietly. "You said you wanted the truth out. This is the megaphone." I hesitated. Every part of me screamed that this was too far. But another part, the one Madison had humiliated, was whispering, "They'd do worse to you if they could." "Fine," I said. "But if we do this, we do it right." The next day was chaos. The news had split into camps. Half believed me, the rogue sculptor, exposing a corrupt gallery empire. Half thought I was a washed-up artist, faking a scandal for attention. I didn't care. I spent the afternoon welding new plates onto my sculptures, thin sheets of metal engraved with the words, "Not for sale." Theo helped pack the truck. "You sure you want to go through with this billboard stunt?" I nodded. "If Madison wants to fight in public, I'll give her a crowd." Echo's message came through. Echo. Midnight. Intersection of 15th and Larimer. Bring the drive. I slipped the USB into my pocket like a loaded weapon. Denver's skyline was clear that night, sharp against the cold. We parked in a service alley near the billboard control box. Echo's crew was already there, tools spread out like a crime scene. "Signal's ready," Juno said. "All we need is the file." I plugged the USB into his laptop. "Use the footage from last night and add the contracts." He nodded, fingers flying across the keyboard. Echo turned to me. "Once this goes live, Eastline's finished. You ready to be the face of it?" I smiled, though my hands trembled. "I already am." He flipped the switch. For a moment, the night went still. Then, the massive digital billboard above 15th Street flickered. An ad for perfume dissolved into static. And then, my face appeared pale, fierce, determined. Behind me, images flashed: emails, invoices, signatures, one after another. Pedestrians stopped. Cars slowed. People pointed. The headline appeared in white letters across the skyline: "The real price of art." The crowd grew. Phones lifted. I stood in the shadows, watching it all unfold, heart pounding. Then the billboard cut to black. The lights went out across 3 blocks. Echo swore. "What the hell?" Theo's voice came over the radio, panicked. "Cleo, someone's jamming the feed." Then, a new image appeared on the billboard, grainy, distorted. Madison Vale. She was sitting in her office, smiling into the camera. "Cleo," she said, "you've made this fun. But it's over. You really should have read your contracts more carefully." My blood ran cold. She leaned closer to the lens. "You don't own any of that work. We do. Every file, every piece, every weld. You just violated a dozen federal laws. Congratulations. You're going to make me rich again." The screen went black. The crowd erupted in confusion. Echo turned to me. "What did she mean? You don't own it?" I swallowed hard. "There's a clause in the consignment paperwork." I didn't think she'd. Theo cut in on the radio. "Cleo, she's serious. I just checked Eastline's website. They've posted a digital claim notice. They're suing you for theft and copyright violation." Echo swore under his breath. "We've been outplayed." I clenched my fists. "No, not yet." I looked at the dark billboard, then at the USB still in Juno's laptop. "If she wants to talk contracts," I said, "we'll give her a public reading." Echo raised an eyebrow. "What are you planning?" I took a deep breath. It's time to bring her into the light, literally. As we packed up, I looked down the street. Police lights reflected off the buildings. The crowd was dispersing, confused, buzzing with speculation. Madison's face had vanished, but her message echoed in my head. She'd gone on the offensive and I could feel it. She wasn't done, neither was I. Because I had one card left. Something on that USB I hadn't told anyone about. An email chain labeled Eastline Trust, hidden accounts. Madison wasn't just underpricing artists. She was laundering money through their sales. And if I played this right, she wouldn't just lose her gallery, she'd lose her freedom. I looked at Echo. "Tomorrow, we stop being artists." He frowned. "Then what are we?" I met his eyes. "Whistleblowers." The snow began falling again, soft and relentless. Somewhere downtown, Madison Vale was plotting her next move, and I was plotting mine. This wasn't just revenge anymore. This was justice. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I read. Page after page of folded lies. Ink that smelled like someone else's greed. The folder labeled Eastline Trust, Hidden Accounts, was a rabbit hole. Shell companies, offshore transfers, sales recorded as private acquisitions with numbers that didn't match any wire confirmations. Payments routed through art advisors, then rerouted to a holding company with Madison's initials in the signature block. Someone had been laundering prestige into cash. Theo sat across from me, eyeing the documents like a man who'd found a map to buried teeth. "This is beyond underpricing," he said. "This is theft on a corporate scale." "It's proof," I said. "Not just that they undercut me, but that they profited off it. And that they lied to hundreds of collectors and artists." He nodded. "If this goes public, watchdogs, IRS, journalists, this is the kind of scandal that eats galleries for breakfast." Echo was quieter than usual. "You sure you want to blow this open? There are consequences. People get scared. People get hurt." I flinched at the truth of it. I'd already put us all on the line. I had friends who could lose jobs, people who'd be dragged into subpoenas and depositions. "You're being sentimental," Theo said. "You aimed at Madison. You hit a nest of vipers. Either you pull this out clean, or she buries you, and the rest of us." I thought about Madison in her office, sunglasses like armor, speaking perfectly measured lies to cameras. I thought about that spreadsheet, how she'd assigned price tags to my future. "No more waiting," I said. "We go to the press, we go to the regulators, we leak everything." Echo exhaled slowly. "Okay. We need a plan that can't be wiped. Multiple outlets, anonymous uploads, hard copies mailed to watchdogs. If they try to scrub it, the paper trail will already be in the hands of people who can't be intimidated by a PR team." We made lists. Names of journalists who'd actually report, not just retweet. A tax attorney Theo knew who owed the world a favor. A nonprofit watchdog that had once taken down a corrupt developer. We worked in shifts. I prepared redacted packets to protect people who'd been unwittingly involved. Theo formatted files for secure transfer. Echo rigged little physical packages, flash drives in plain envelopes, mailed to multiple addresses across the country, with return addresses that led nowhere. At dusk, I stood outside Eastline and watched from across the street. Madison was inside, probably throwing a meeting, probably dialing lawyers. The place looked small and ordinary, like any storefront trying too hard to be a shrine. I thought about the sculptures tucked into my truck overnight, the ones they'd tried to cheapen. They were now pieces in a war I hadn't planned to wage. We sent the packets. Within hours, journalists who'd ignored art for months were calling. An investigative reporter in New York emailed with a terse subject line: "We're on it." A local nonprofit confirmed receipt. The tax attorney asked for everything, and promised to read with a red pen. Then, like a quiet before a new kind of storm, all communication stopped. My phone went dead of battery and strategy at the same time. At midnight, a single text came through from an unknown number. "You played with fire, now they're bringing the heat." The next morning, my studio door was covered in a white sheet of paper, a notice from a law firm. "Preserve all records. Do not tamper. No legal threat, not yet. Just the first knock." I realized, with a weight that settled into my bones, that this was no longer about art. It was about survival. And at the corner of the notice, someone had scribbled in red ink, "We own you." I folded the paper into my fist until the creases hurt. Then my phone buzzed again. An email from the New York reporter. "We need to talk. Your file is massive. Come to Manhattan, tomorrow." I closed my laptop and stared at the skyline. I wanted to go, to hand over the last pieces in person, to watch the first domino fall. But leaving Denver would mean exposure, my face on every channel, my movements predictable. I thought of my father again, how he used to say, "You set it down when it's heavy enough." The folder in my lap felt like a child's weight. Outside, a van idled in the street. Two men inside watched the gallery with an attention that belonged in espionage movies. One thumbed a phone. I took a breath. The world had shifted beneath my feet, and someone on the other side of town was already lighting a match. The lawyer on the phone didn't introduce himself. He asked me to stop everything and warned me, politely and thinly, that I was about to be responsible for a great deal of harm. "Miss Mathers," he said, "our client will pursue all remedies available." I hung up, the word remedies looping like a rattling chain. I had options. Most of them involved hiding or folding. None sat well with me. I called the New York reporter. He wanted evidence, corroboration, witnesses. He wanted to know why I'd waited until now. I told him the truth, that I'd believed the gallery when they called themselves partners, that I'd trusted Madison, that I'd found the folder late at night in the back room of an office that smelled like lemon disinfectant and arrogance. You understand the magnitude, right? He asked. This could destroy people's lives. Yes, I said. Also, it's true. The story went slow at first. Editors weigh legal risk like a compass. But the reporter had backbone. He set up a phone call with a tax attorney who scraped through shell company filings and confirmed the money flows. He secured a signal boost from a national outlet willing to hold until lawyers had checked the edges. In the meantime, Madison escalated. Eastline posted a formal notice accusing me of theft, copyright infringement, and interference with business relations. They uploaded a PDF of my original consignment contracts pages I'd signed in a haze of excitement and trust. Reading them felt like watching someone read your diary on a stage. There was, buried deep in the boilerplate, a clause, a horrific, legal hedgehog that wrapped itself around my ankles. It meant Eastline had rights to digitally archive works and to use images for marketing, and it gave them first refusal on future sales. It didn't give them ownership, but Madison's team spun it, mercilessly, into a narrative that I'd abandoned legal caution in favor of publicity. Suddenly, several collectors called, confused. "Didn't we buy something last night?" they asked. "Is it really hers to exhibit?" A few nervous collectors, those Madison had cozied up to, issued statements backing her, calling for restraint and legal process. Echo watched the news feed, jaw tight. "This is exactly why I said not to escalate to billboards," he muttered. "They're playing defense." Theo slammed the table. "They're trying to drown us in paperwork and fear. We fight back with facts." We did. Every call, every email, every archive I had became evidence. The New York reporter published an in-depth piece that didn't accuse without evidence. He called out the financial trails, quoted the tax attorney, and exposed specific transactions. The announcement hit like a second wave. Madison screamed in the press, publicly composed, privately raging. Eastline released an internal memo denying wrongdoing and threatening litigation. A conservative art magazine, sensing a feeding frenzy, ran a takedown piece that positioned me as reckless, endangering collectors and the sanctity of the market. I started to lose friends, people who'd thought being neutral was safer. Some artists whispered that I'd set a dangerous precedent. "You'll ruin careers," one said as she walked away. I felt the sting like a fresh weld. Then the first subpoena arrived. I thought of my hands, calloused and clever. The subpoena demanded bank records, shipping manifests, correspondence. It felt surgical and invasive. My life folded open under numbered paragraphs. I hired a lawyer. The tax attorney Theo recommended, a woman with short hair and a keener stare than most judges. She moved fast protective orders, preservation notices, and an ultimatum filed to pause Eastline's attempts to scrub their servers. She told me, bluntly, that we were close to something big, but warned that Madison wouldn't go quietly. "You're not alone," she said. "But be ready for the long haul. She has resources. So, do you now use them?" Her eyes flicked to the folder on my table. "And vet everyone." Days passed like a row of steel plates sliding across each other. Foot traffic at my studio became a trickle. Some came to show support, others to ask for autographs, and others to stare like vultures at the meat of a scandal. Late one night, a man in a suit too small for him left a plain envelope on my doorstep. Inside, a single photo, glossy, of me under the overpass, the date stamped. On the back, in blocky handwriting, "We watch." I burned that photo in the sink, the edges curling like newspaper dyeing. Then, at midnight, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a video link from an unknown sender. I hesitated, then pressed play. Madison sat in her office, not the polished version from the news, but candid sneering directly into the camera. She spoke slowly, with a softness designed to unsettle. You think you can take everything I built and throw it into the snow? She said. You think the world owes you something? Watch what happens when I make these allegations stick. The video cut to a montage of faces, collectors, curators, each overlaid with a number, an account balance, a transfer, a hint, a threat, and then the final frame. A street view photo of my studio, the timestamp recent. Someone was watching my comings and goings. I swallowed a sound. Madison had moved from legal maneuvers to something colder: surveillance, intimidation. I realized, in that instant, that exposure wasn't enough. I needed to protect what I loved: my work, my people, my own breath. Outside, a car idled. I watched its taillights disappear down the street. The war had turned personal. The man from the Arts Commission looked older than his title. He had the tired face of someone used to firefighting PR disasters. "Miss Mathers," he said, "we've been monitoring Eastline for a while. You've given us reason to act sooner." Relief flickered, quick and bright. "You'll help stop her?" I asked. He folded the folder open slowly. Inside, internal complaints, a list of previously hushed investigations, documents flagged by anonymous tips. "You did the right thing coming forward," he said. "But this isn't just about one gallery. It's systemic. We'll open a formal probe. We're coordinating with federal investigators." My legs almost gave out. I wanted to weep and laugh at the same time. "We'll need full cooperation," he continued. "Depositions, timeline, everything." I handed over the USB and the copies we'd mailed. I told them the story again, slower, this time: names, dates, the way Madison smiled. The man took notes like a surgeon. As the commission mobilized, Madison's allies started to fray. A prominent collector quietly withdrew support. An advisory board member resigned. Eastline's bank put a temporary hold on suspect transfers. In the public eye, the narrative shifted. The national peace ran with corroboration. Interviews followed where collectors admitted confusing language in sales contracts. Madison's polish began to chip. She responded with lawyers and fury. She filed suits, launched counterclaims, and hired PR teams to paint me as a dangerous provocateur, driven by ego. But the wheels of the commission turned. Subpoenas flew. The probe widened to include shell companies and tax filings in other states. I watched it all like watching my own hands shape a sculpture: slow, methodical, terrifyingly real. There were painful losses. Some members of the art community sided with Madison. A few galleries blacklisted my name to avoid association, fearful of legal entanglement. I lost opportunities. I lost faces in the street. I lost the naive idea that the world always honors truth. Then came the hearing. Madison testified with calm precision, but a line of emails, ones I'd secured, and the commission had validated, told a different story. Her charm was brittle under cross-examination. The financial expert called to the stand explained the web of transfers in plain terms. The judge's jaw tightened at the clarity. When the ruling came months later, it was not a single dramatic knockout, but a series of consequences that unraveled a life built on curated illusion. Eastline paid fines. Several executives were compelled to rescind improper transfers and return profits. Some were criminal referrals, investigations that would stretch for years. Madison faced severe professional consequences. Her gallery's license was revoked pending further inquiry. I didn't dance. I welded. Victory felt complicated. The art market is a strange ecosystem, part beauty, part commerce. Some collectors demanded refunds, others called to offer support. The gallery world did not suddenly become moral, but the probe left scars: transparency requirements, stricter oversight, and a wave of artists renegotiating contracts with new clarity. A year later, I opened a small, independent space. No flashing champagne, no glossy invites. Just a narrow room with concrete floors and my pieces, each with a plate that told its true story. What it cost to make, what Eastline had priced it at, and who had profited. The opening night was modest. People I loved came: Theo, Echo, Juno, Mara. Some old collectors came too, humbled. Madison? She was not in the room. She'd retreated into silence, then into legal limbo. I heard rumors of settlements and whispered lawsuits, but not the thunderous comeback she'd promised herself. I learned things that no headline could teach. Justice is not a single verdict. It's the slow, stubborn rearrangement of power. Power is a fragile sculpture, beautiful until weight and gravity are applied. And value? Value is what you refuse to let others define for you. I still get angry. I still see her face sometimes, on a billboard or in a pulpy article. But now, when someone asks what the whole fight was worth, I bring them to the plate at the base of my sculptures and let the numbers speak. I made a rule for my new gallery: full transparency costs, provenance, contractual terms plainly printed. No euphemisms, no strategies, just the work, the math, and the story. Collectors who loved the work bought it, knowing exactly what they were paying for. And me? I kept making things that could hurt you if you hugged them wrong. One night, years later, a young sculptor stood in my studio, hands trembling, eyes bright. "You taught me to fight," she said. "No," I told her, and I meant it with the weight of everything I'd lost and found. "I taught you to be patient, to build your worth with your hands, and to put a price on your life that nobody else can touch." She laughed, and in that laugh was the sound of futures I'd helped salvage. Madison's name faded into the kind of history that museums sometimes prefer not eradicated, but contextualized, footnoted. I keep the USB in a tiny box now, sealed. Not as a weapon, but as a reminder. The last time I saw Madison, she was leaving town under the radar, her gloves thicker than her pride. I felt nothing but an odd, tired compassion. Power, I'd learned, can be reclaimed one honest transaction at a time. And if anyone ever tried to draw a price on my voice again, I'd be ready, hands steady, torch lit, and a crowd behind me.